Hey guys, it's Nerdy Movie Guy. So today we're going to be talking about Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. Now, I don't know about you guys, this is one of my personal favorites. And when rewatching this movie, I didn't really remember a lot from my first time watching it. So it was a lot of fun to really sort of essentially experience this movie for the first time again. So I really like this movie. So I want to talk about it. The most notable thing about this is you just get the sense of dread all throughout the movie because it keeps pushing and pushing toward the beginning of the first movie, Planet of the Apes. And the thing for this one is it's heavily reliant on everything mentioned in Escape from the Planet of the Apes. So when Cornelius and Zira are talking about the downfall of man, they mention how there's this flu that basically kills off all dogs and cats. So humans take on chimpanzees as pets, then they work, then they become slaves, then they become alert to the concept of slavery, they fight back and take over. And that's the explanation Cornelius and Zira give the humans in the last movie. And in this movie, we see the beginnings of that. When we open, we see, Caesar, not from the trilogy, but from this franchise, Caesar, he's shown the statue of the cats and dogs. And, because they've already died out at this point in the movie. So this movie takes place 20 years after Escape from the Planet of the Apes. So it sort of sets the premise, and it sort of builds that intensity just, from the start. The whole time, I was just thinking, I'm like, wow, this is pushing closer and closer to the downfall of humans. And, of course, we don't really, believe that would happen. But watching these movies, it's just sort of this eerie thought of, what if we saw the beginnings of this? And in the trilogy, it was a cool movie. Rise of the Planet of the Apes was a really cool movie to showcase this concept. But I feel like in the originals, it's just done differently in a way where I feel it's more effective. You feel the sense of urgency of what the humans are trying to do, and it just makes it more engaging, I feel, in a concept like this one. So that's one of the other things about this movie, is it just felt engaging through and through, just like the last one for me. So I really am enjoying watching the series, and I enjoyed this one as well. So basically, I think the plot is kind of straightforward. There's not a lot of layers to it. There are different concepts and storylines to play out, but overall, in comparison to the rest of, in my opinion, the Planet of the Apes movies, I think there were the least amount of different named characters in this movie than any of the others. And I could be wrong. That was just one of my first reactions when I finished this movie. Is I thought, wow, there are not a lot of characters, and that's okay. Because Caesar was the primary focus for this movie, and it just worked out that way. Where we didn't need any other characters. Because I think it worked better having Caesar trying to, round up the other apes. For most of them being unnamed, I think it sort of helped the impact of, they just seemed more primitive, but it also made them seem more fearful to go from primitive apes to following Caesar into battle. So I think that paid off the way it was directed and scripted in this movie. So that's one of the parts, it's the last third of the movie that the Conquest begins. And it's just really entertaining. It's really fun. It's nonstop action. I think the last 30 minutes is nonstop action. And it was just wildly entertaining. So, of course, you have the concepts of there's still the dread for the humans of apes taking over because of the words of Cornelius and Zira. What they said happens in their future. So, the humans are still trying to race and find out if Cornelius and Zira has swapped the babies, which they did. And, they're just trying to discover Caesar's existence. Until he's seen, they still believe in the fact that he could still be alive. And it just sort of creates this presence, this threat, that Caesar is. And he's sort of mistreated in this movie, but he's also sort of the villain at the same time. It's really 50-50. Who you want to root for. And I think I mentioned it in my last video with the whole Twilight thing, with the whole Captain America Civil War thing, where it kind of forced you to choose sides. I felt like Escape from the Planet of the Apes was sort of treated that way, and I feel like this movie could be treated the same way as well, with the humans and Caesar. So the humans are really harsher, I think, in this movie than the last one. In the last one, obviously, there are a few characters that want to hunt down Cornelius and Zira, but overall, for the movie as a whole, there are more characters who are harsher in this movie than the last one. So it sort of builds up the hype around Caesar, where you're just kind of rooting for him, or at least I was. In this situation, if it were real, of course humans would be the ones to root for. But in a movie like this, it's Caesar that I was rooting for, and not only was this movie had engaging and interesting concepts throughout the first hour, then it pivoted to nonstop action, which was very entertaining. But then in the last few minutes, Caesar has this whole speech, and it's one of those things where I had to take a step back, and I was like, wow, this was extremely well scripted. This was intense. It was almost scary. It was done so well. It's now one of my favorite scenes from the franchise, is Caesar's speech at the end of a Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. I'm mixing the names together. I've seen so many by now. So this is why it's one of my favorites, is that scene alone helps push this movie to become one of my favorites. So with that being said, I don't remember much about Battle for the Planet of the Apes at all. I remember bits and pieces from the first four, but I barely remember anything from Battle for the Planet of the Apes one bit. So I'm excited to watch it, or rewatch it, so to speak, because I do want to see it for the first time again. I want to see how it plays out, how it ends, how could it connect to the other movies, how doesn't it? I want to see that connectivity between the franchise and see if there's anything that can be continued from that movie in today's time, whether or not Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes takes from that or not. I think it would be very interesting with the whole multiverse concept going around Hollywood these days. I don't think Planet of the Apes needs a multiverse, but to that respect, an example for Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, where there are a lot of fans that would like to see him in another movie now. I think Planet of the Apes, as far as the originals are concerned, I think it could be fascinating if they do make a sixth Planet of the Apes that ties in with the original ones. Of course, there would be a new cast, but I think it could be a fun, experimental thing to do if they don't use CGI, if they have the apes appear how they did in the original ones. I think it could be fascinating for the big screen. I don't really think that's going to happen, but it's just one of the things I think about and that I think could make a lot of money. Just because I think a lot of people, especially for this franchise, they're drawn so much to the originals, rightfully so, given their impact on, just movies in general. So I appreciate the trilogy. Obviously, as modern movies go, it is one of my favorite trilogies. As a franchise goes, this is one of my favorites. And the originals help cement why it's one of my favorites. It kind of it's the backbone for the rest of the movie, especially the first one. So I would love to see this franchise continue. I hope they don't milk it and oversaturate it the way they have tried to do with Star Wars. But I feel like Planet of the Apes could always do with another movie. I think there's always concepts to explore, there's storylines to experiment with. Overall, I've loved the originals so far. I'm so glad I watched them all, even though my opinion on Beneath was a little shaky. I still appreciate it as a movie. I think it deserves its place in this franchise. So I can't wait to watch the next one. I can't wait to review the next one. So thank you guys so much for watching.